Please be seated. Good evening and welcome to the Council meeting this evening. I would like to welcome everyone here this evening, and I see we have quite a full house. Welcome to you all. This is the meeting of Newcastle City Council, and we will be moving on to the business on the agenda this evening. So, we will start with item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We've had apologies from councillors Ahad, Ainsley, Alibi, Beecham, Corbett, Down, Forbes, Hindmarsh, Puddart, Lower, McGuinness, O'Brien, Renton and Taylor.
Do we have any further apologies? Thank you. We now move on to item 2, minutes of previous meetings. First of all, does Council agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of April 2016? Great, thank you. And the special meeting of Council held on the 25th of May 2016? Great. And the annual meeting of Council held on the 25th of May 2016? Great, thank you. Item 3, official announcements. Can I first of all welcome a number of international students who are visiting here today from Italy. The students are in Newcastle for 2 weeks to study English and learn more about our British and Geordie culture before returning back to their academies at home as ambassadors for Newcastle and the North East. I believe they're in the chamber this evening. Yes? Hello. Very pleased to welcome you this evening, and I hope you've had a lovely stay in Newcastle. Thank you. We have now been notified of the death of Donald Williamson in May 2016. Mr. Williamson served on the Council's Independent Remuneration Panel from May 2003 and was due to stand down from the panel at the annual meeting this year. On behalf of the Council, may I offer condolences to all of Mr. Williamson's family. In addition to this, members, I am sure we were all shocked and deeply saddened by the murder of Jo Cox last month, an attack that took place while she was going about her duties as an elected representative. While Jo may not have been known to many of us here, her words will have touched many of us, especially and sadly, as so often happens, after someone's death. Jo dedicated her life to campaigning on behalf of the most vulnerable and reminded us that globally there is more that unites us than divides us. We see all too often the tragic consequences of terrorism and indeed hate in places around the world recently, such as Dhaka, Baghdad and Orlando. And I think we should now reflect on this, all the sadness in the world, in a 2-minute silence, and also remembering Mr. Williamson, who served this council so well. So if I could ask council to stand, please. Thank you. We now move on to petitions. We have received 2 petitions this month. First of all, I will invite Mr. Jason Smith to present a petition on behalf of residents against proposals for Highways England to close the A1 slip road, junction 75. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The petition is signed by 1,115 people. The petition reads, Highways England is proposing to close the access road to the A1 northbound slip road at South West Denton, junction 75. This is a vital link that was created for residents of South West Denton and Dumpling Hall when the A1 was constructed to allow easy access onto the A1 and to the West Road. It moves traffic onto main roads quickly, ensuring that pressure on local estates roads is minimised. This proposal will have a massive impact on many local residents, increasing traffic on the West Road, as well as Neptune Road, Leamington Road Ends and Union Hall Road. It will make many estate roads less safe for children as traffic is increased. Many of the closest services to South West Denton are to the east of the A1, and the proposed closure of the slip road will substantially increase journey times by car at the busiest times of the day. We, the undersigned, demand that Highways England rethink plans to close our slip road at Birchfield Gardens and call on Newcastle City Council to object formally to the proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I call on Councillor Bell, Cabinet Member, to respond. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Smith, and thanks for bringing this petition to the Council. At this point in time, it would be premature for the City Council to object, as Highways England are still developing their plans and have made no formal proposal to us to close Birchfield Gardens. In addition to attending the public drop-ins, the Leamington Ward councillors have held meetings with Highways England supported by officers of the Council. These meetings have ensured that Highways England understand the issues associated with the potential closure, and they are undertaking traffic counts on a wider area than what would normally be surveyed to understand the potential mitigation that would be required if they move forward with a proposal to close the slip road. This approach of working with Highways England to ensure both parties have accurate and robust data and evidence on which to make a decision will place us in a much stronger position to represent local residents while also supporting improvements to the A1 Western Bypass, which are crucial to the city and the wider region. Once again, I thank you for the petition.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Does Council agree to receive the petition? Thank you. I now will invite Councillor Hillocks to present a petition regarding the proposed sport hub development at Callerton. Councillor Hillocks.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Will the leader of Newcastle City Council stop the Callerton Sports Hub development, halt the proposed sports hub development at this location and reallocate funding to existing facilities across the local area? This is important to avoid contamination of adjoining land, avoid contaminating nearby watercourse caused by levelling of disused colliery spoil heap, to avoid air pollution and risk to public health resulting from excavation of the site, for the conservation of wildlife corridor, and to preserve open space for the enjoyment of future generations, and to protect sport and community facilities across the local area which accommodate a broader cross-section of the community which would be closed if this goes ahead. We, the undersigned, therefore call upon the Council to abandon this proposal and say no to the proposed sports hub and yes to green fields, open spaces, wildlife and highway cattle. There's about 1,500 signatures so far, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor
Thank you.
Hicks. I call on Councillor Bell, Cabinet Member, to respond. Councillor Bell.
Thank you for the introduction, Lord Mayor. And just for the audience, I'm Cabinet Member for Investment and Development, and it was addressed to the Leader of City Council, but because it's within my portfolio, I will be addressing the Council. I do apologise for having my back to the audience, but I'm not one to play to the gallery, but I should just speak to the Lord Mayor, but I'm obviously addressing everybody in the chamber. I'd like to thank Councillor Hicks for bringing the petition to Council. And the petition, as we've heard, is against the possible sports facilities opposite St John's Estate and the west of Stamford Road. What we're talking about here, Lord Mayor, is the draft, and I've got to stress the draft Callerton Master Plan, and that sets out how the housing allocations in the area can be delivered with the associated and required infrastructure. We have consulted widely on the document and are looking carefully at the responses received. I intend, as Cabinet Member, to take the draft Master Plan to Cabinet as soon as practicable for members' consideration. I would stress that no decision will be made on the Master Plan until that meeting. I will ensure that the petition is noted in the Cabinet report. I thank the attendance of the community tonight, and I also thank Councillor Hicks for bringing the petition to my attention.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Does Council agree to refer the petition to Cabinet? Thank you. We now move on to item 5, public question time. We have received 2 requests to ask questions at Council this evening. The first request is linked, I believe, to the previous petition, and I invite Mr. Empson to the lectern. Mr. Empson, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. As stated, Newcastle City Council is proposing to build a sports hub facility at the rear of St John's Estate, west to Hope. This course of action will require extensive levelling of disused colliery spoil heap, which will result in an exposure to contaminated waste material. And this will cause contamination of adjoining land, high risk of air pollution detrimental to public health, and it will involve exorbitant project costs in addition to the 1.2 million that is already identified in the build cost. This action will result in destruction of an existing wildlife corridor that's enjoyed by the community well represented here today, decimating open space enjoyed by a vast range of individuals, not just those that play team games, and closure of existing local facilities that provide sports and recreational facilities in the area for a broad cross-section of the local community. As stated, a petition has been delivered to the Council showing approximately 1,500 residents against the sports hub. And those residents are from the area and also further afield. We simply don't agree with the proposal and are against the sports hub. I have a question to the Council, which is, why is this course of action being pursued as opposed to developers' land being used or the upgrading of existing community facilities that urgently need its support, i.e. West Hope Community Association? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Empson. I call on Councillor Bell, Cabinet Member, to respond to the question. Councillor Bell.
Thank you again, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Mr Emerson. As you will be aware, I've got no doubt, the Council adopted its core strategy back in March 2015 following extensive years of consultation and examination in public. This allocated land at Callerton for around 3,000 houses, and the policy requires the area to be comprehensively plan to ensure that all of the necessary infrastructure can be provided at the right time. To achieve this, the Council has been working with developers to produce a master plan for the area, setting out the overall approach to housing and infrastructure delivery for the whole of the allocation. Consultation on the master plan has taken place from the 9th of May until the 4th of June 2016, and it is my intention to take a report to Cabinet as soon as practicable to consider the revised document. If it is approved, it will be a material consideration in the determination of applications for the Callerton sites and will help guide the delivery of housing and infrastructure to meet the Council's growth aspirations. The development will generate a significant new demand for sports facilities, and the draft master plan identifies a possible location where these can be provided. Grouping the facilities will allow both new and existing residents access to a wide range of sports pitches and help achieve fit and healthy communities. If a sports hub does come forward on this site, it will need planning permission, and residents will be fully consulted on the detail at that time. Any application would need to address all the material planning considerations, including, as you've mentioned tonight, environmental impacts and impacts on residential amenities. I will ensure that the residents' concerns are brought to the attention of Cabinet when they are making a decision on the draft master plan. Thank you again.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Mr Empson, you now have an opportunity to respond to the Cabinet member.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bell. It's noted that this is going to be taken to Cabinet and dealt with in the serious manner it deserves. It's clear to me that the site in question to the rear of St John's, as explained, is not suitable for housing development. It's on a very sloping site, and as I say, it's used for a wildlife corridor and well enjoyed by the community. But it's clear that Newcastle City Council see this as surplus land which is of no financial benefit to them. And the building of the sports hub on this site, as opposed to on the developer's land, will therefore allow more houses to be built. This will ensure Newcastle City Council take their maximum levy from the extra houses built. Basically, the existing facilities will be run down and residents are not being listened to, who are the major stakeholder here. We don't want the sports hub. It's not needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Does Council agree to refer this matter to Cabinet? Thank you. Councillor Donnelly?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. We would like to move under Standing Orders 11G that this item be referred to Cabinet in consultation with the lead Cabinet member and ward members. We would also request that this matter is reported back to the Council and the West Oak Ward Committee for consideration and decision about any appropriate action. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Fairley?
Can I make a point of order here? The land in question is actually not in Wester Hope Ward, it's in Newburn Ward. And as such, the Newburn Ward members have already been working on this at the request of residents that have raised it with us. And we've been in meetings and discussions with this because it's in our ward. And I'd just like to put on record that we think Councillor Donnelly's involvement in this is unhelpful when it's not in his ward and it shouldn't really be anything to do with him.
Sit down. Sorry.
Just as a point of clarification, Lord Mayor, is the mic on? Just as a point of clarification, Lord Mayor, as a councillor for West Hope, I'm also a councillor for Newcastle City Council and the overall city. And my interest is with the whole area, not just my ward.
Councillor Donnelly, as far as I'm aware, there are elections which you are elected to a designated ward. You may be a councillor in Newcastle City Council, but you are elected to represent the citizens of that ward with boundaries in it, and the city as a whole. But on this occasion, I think we need to be quite clear. You have moved a motion. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Thank you. Councillor Hillocks, you've seconded that motion. Can I now move that the motion be voted upon, whether we move for the question to be taken and to Cabinet and referred to Cabinet to deal with, or not? Thank you. John?
Lord Mayor, I understood that the Cabinet member, Councillor Bell, proposed that the matter be moved to Cabinet, and then Councillor Donnelly proposed that the matter be moved to Cabinet and in consultation with the Ward Committee, and then reported back to Council and the Ward Committee. I think that was the matter which required a vote on. I understand it's been seconded by Councillor Hillocks. Unless the matter is agreed, then it will proceed to the vote. Is a vote required?
Lord Mayor, further point of clarification required here on a legal ground. I did actually say that I would take this back to Cabinet as soon as practicable. So that gives officers time to collate all the information and formulate a report for Cabinet. I cannot see the difference that's been brought up through a standing order, which Councillor Donnelly's done. Is that not exactly what I said anyway?
John?
Lord Mayor, I think there was a slight difference in the proposed approach to dealing with it, which was put forward by Councillor Donnelly. As Councillor Bell has outlined, the matter would be going to Cabinet in any event, and I think it's a matter now for Council to vote on whether they wish to deal with the matter as proposed by Councillor Donnelly. Would you like me to repeat what I said?
No, I think we are quite clear, Councillor Donnelly. We've taken legal advice.
So,
can we move to the vote?
Sorry, I think we need to take a vote on
yes.
the amendment.
Thank you.
Or the proposed way of dealing with it.
We're moving on the amendment. No, Councillor Hillocks, we're voting. Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, but the bridal path the gentleman's talking about happens to be part of his own RSD.
That is not the question that we are voting on. Thank you. Can we move? We are not consulting on where the land is. It's in the master plan. What has been said is what has been requested will be taken back to Cabinet, and that will be then discussed further, including the question that has been asked this evening. Thank you.
Part of it falls within the Westerhope ward, and that is quite clear. That will be documented on council papers. So let's just be clear here. Half of the land is in Westerhope ward, the rest of the land is in Newburn ward, but half of it is in... And also, Lord Mayor, residents bear no boundaries, and the residents who are here this evening are from Westerhope and Newburn ward. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Lord Mayor, just to be clear, I think Councillor Bell made clear that the matter will be brought to the attention of Cabinet and considered by Cabinet in any event. So I don't think, whilst I understand that people feel very strongly about the description of whether it is a matter relating to Westerhope or Newburn, the main point is that the matter will be drawn to the attention of Cabinet, as Councillor Bell has explained. And during the last debate, I think the vote was concluded to reject the proposed way of dealing with it, and then I assume from that that the matter is to be referred to Cabinet as proposed by Councillor Bell initially.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. The matter has been dealt with. Councillor Donnelly, please, would you sit down? Councillor Donnelly, would you please sit down, or else you will be removed from the chamber. Listen. Silence. Sit down. Now, sit down. This is disrespectful to this council, Councillor Donnelly. The residents may live in Newburn, or they may live in Westerhope, or they may even live in Leamington. This question was around a piece of land that you say covers a number of areas. All of those areas will be discussed in the question that has been asked. Councillor Donnelly, let me finish. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the Cabinet will take on board what has been said. That will then be reported as usual fashion back. Now, the petition that has been handed in earlier by Councillor Hillocks will also be dealt with in the usual fashion, and that will be reported back in writing to Councillor Hillocks. That is exactly what you have asked for. So would you please sit down? Thank you. Can I please ask you one more time, Councillor Donnelly, to sit down? I cannot be any clearer in what I have said. All the residents involved in the areas concerned in the question that has been asked will be dealt with as any other item and agenda that comes to this council in the usual fashion, and it has been agreed by council that this will be dealt with through Cabinet. Can you please respect the rules of council? Councillor Donnelly, please sit down. Sit down. You are breaking the Constitution, Councillor Donnelly, and this is most respectful to everyone in council. This matter has been dealt with. It has been dealt with in the proper, usual fashion. And you are out of order, Councillor Donnelly. All these residents expect decency from their councillors. You have been asked to sit down. The residents that live in Newburn, in Leamington, in Walbottle, in Westerhope, and any other part of the city that are involved with this area and meeting process and have the questions, they will get the necessary response from Cabinet. Thank you, Councillor Donnelly, and I would ask you to respect the rules in the future. Everyone is treated fairly and the same, and this is the agreement of council. Thank you, Councillor.
Can I suggest we adjourn for 5 minutes to deal with this matter? Thank you.
Thank you. I ask everyone to adjourn for 5 minutes, please. What did I tell you? Right, I'm off. Okay. If you could all resume your seats, please. Thank you. Thank you. We will now resume. We move on, Council business, to the second address and question from Sally Watson on behalf of Newcastle Cycling Campaign. Thank you, Sally.
In the last few years, Newcastle has started to make progress towards constructing a city which is fit for cycling. Cycling is on the agenda, and we are delighted to note that debates are now positive and constructive. We all now appreciate, I think, that cycling is a key ingredient in building an inclusive transport system. Providing an inexpensive and easy way to get around is important, particularly in Newcastle with its struggling health and socio-economic challenges. High cycling levels are an indicator for a thriving, modern and innovative city, and one which looks outwards, attracting new people and new businesses. Healthy streets nurture healthy, happy and productive communities, and this is achieved by building cycling into the transport system. In recognition of this, it was great to see nearly all of Newcastle's councillors support Space for Cycling, proudly making Newcastle the leading core city in England. Thank you, this is entirely down to you. But Newcastle cannot afford to rest. We must keep the ball rolling to turn this unique opportunity into real action through cross-party cooperation. Newcastle, our city, is worth it. The economic argument for cycling is clear. Department for Transport figures show that every pound spent on cycling infrastructure is returned at least fivefold, and World Health Organization tells us that every mile cycled saves our city a pound. Current cycling levels already save Newcastle millions of pounds. So today, I stand here in front of you with a plea. What I am about to say is based on our campaign's 6 years of hard volunteering work, researching, informing and planning cycling in the city. As a management committee member of New Cycling, and with its over 1,600 members in mind, I would like to give you our assessment on where we are and propose some next steps. Support for cycleways has never been stronger, but the lack of safe infrastructure must be overcome. This is particularly important when travelling with children, when you're hauling your shopping around with you, or if your physical abilities or age become a challenge. A separate cycle space is totally essential for these kinds of journeys. For the 97% of men, women and children who don't currently regularly cycle, a lack of safe space is the main obstacle. The really good news is that the potential shift towards cycling is massive. The 2011 census shows us that in Newcastle, 40% of car commutes are short, under 5 kilometres to be precise, which according to the British Medical Association is a perfect distance for cycling. Addressing that 40% would mean 35,000 cars off the road network. Imagine what could be done with that space. We have to rethink our approach to relieving congestion, improving junction capacity and smoothing traffic, as one of reducing air pollution through reducing car use. We, as a city, must thoroughly think through the process of transport transition. If we don't, car use, congestion and pollution will get worse, along with all of the associated health problems and costs to businesses. We also need to remember that 42% of households in Newcastle do not even have a car. We need to provide differently in the future, and we need to provide for the future. Newcastle has started to make plans, but these plans must now grow in their strength and clarity. So you may ask, what do we need to do right now? Through our involvement and observation over many years, New Cycling knows that there are 4 vital points that we must now urgently act on to keep up momentum. 1, clear vision. A consolidation of current council statements is overdue. Newcastle needs to build on the Cycle Manifesto, Space for Cycling and Cycle Strategy to create a clear and confident vision with an engineering master programme to integrate cycling into Newcastle's streetscape. 2, clear budgets. Civil servants work to budgets. If a clear budget line existed for cycleway construction, engineers and planners could make much better plans and programmes. The Dutch told Newcastle City Council's delegates at the Go Dutch conference held here at the Civic Centre in 2013 that we should set aside a dedicated annual budget. £6 million a year would meet Dutch levels of expenditure on cycleway construction. 3, a clear cycle network. The primary interest of housing developers is to make a profit. It is vital that we ensure that Newcastle gets something in return. Newcastle must map out a cycle network to give clarity over developers' contributions. The cycle network must be adopted into transport policy to give it strength and status. 4, clear designs. London has made huge strides in building high-quality protected cycleways. This is the result of clear vision, clear budgets and clear design standards. Urban transport needs and problems are quite universal. Newcastle should adopt London standards to help city planners and engineers to design good infrastructure for cycling and better streets for people in general. In summary, Newcastle is facing great challenges and needs to make ambitious plans for the future. We suggest that it's best to do it together. Building on Council's momentum and successes to date, consolidating Newcastle's vision to become a cycle city is the next logical step. This must be supported by a clear budget line on the Council's balance sheets. We should adopt the London cycle design standards to make it easier for engineers and planners to design the right things. And we must also map and adopt into policy the cycle network, ensuring investment and construction. We are eager to hear Council's response to our proposal. The challenges which come with change are easier to tackle if we work together. We love Newcastle. Newcastle is a great city. Newcastle would be even greater with a clearly, confidently and collectively mapped out cycling future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms Watson. I call on Councillor Bell, Cabinet Member, to respond to the address.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Sally. I think that was an ideal example about the resilience of yourself and your colleagues within the group, of the way that you managed to get through the noise and disruption that was being caused by people vacating the chamber, but you managed to stick at it, and you have been able to stick at this all the way through the campaign. So you and your colleagues and volunteers are due a lot of credit for your role that you've played in lifting cycling up the agenda in the city since you formed the campaign in 2010. You've made a number of really positive points about the rationale for investing in cycling and infrastructure and have progressed and the progress that we've made as a city. We all appreciate the value, the fact that the city's relationship with the cycling campaign is a lot more constructive now than it perhaps was a few years ago. To respond directly to the 4 points which you've actually just highlighted there near the end, we agree that a clear description of the vision is required, but believe this is not just about cycling. It's about how to make a healthier city where every generation has a better quality of life than the one before. And providing protected and integrated cycle facilities is part of that. The Transport and Public Health Departments are already working on this with the aim of us reissuing a revised and refocused cycling strategy in this, the 5th year of a 10-year period. As part of that revised cycling strategy, I agree. A clear network and design standards would be appropriate, and we'll act to include them as part of this. Finally, clear, transparent budgets are important, and while we can't commit to the £6 million level you highlighted at this point for various reasons, we will issue a highways report every year that outlines what we've spent, on what, and what happens next. I really thank you sincerely for bringing this to the attention, and I sincerely thank you and the rest of your colleagues for all of the work that you've put in. You're a fantastic example of what can be done by people joining together and acting and communicating and working with the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Ms Watson, you now have an opportunity to respond to the Cabinet Member.
Just to say thank you very much. It's good to hear that some of those things will be acted on, and we really look forward to seeing it on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We now move on to item 6 on the agenda, reports referred from Cabinet. Council Plan 2016-17. I will call on Councillor McCarthy to move the report. Seconded by Councillor Powers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'll be very brief because I think Councillor Powers will go into the purpose of this report in a little bit more detail. Lord Mayor, this is the high-level plan which sets out our vision for the year. It's obviously based on the 4 priorities of City Council and indeed the paper that came to City Council earlier this year in terms of ambition in the face of austerity, which highlights our cooperative ways of working. As usual, Lord Mayor, this does not have any detail. The details will be in the Directorate plans which sit underneath this. And we do commit to reporting back quarterly to Cabinet, and I think it almost certainly goes to overview and scrutiny as well for a discussion there too. So we've referred this from Cabinet, Lord Mayor, to enable everyone to see what's contained within the plan, and I think it's self-evident, really. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Powers.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I don't really have much more to add. It's a pleasure to second this council plan to full council. We just wanted to add, obviously, the council plan is an essential document here for the workings of the council. It's a document for managers and for staff as it helps them understand the service and work plans, contribute to the overall aims of us as an organisation. What I just wanted to add a little bit on was something that's within the council plan is given an explanation of our 10 big ideas for transformation. This approach has made a significant difference in how improving employee engagement. I'm really grateful for the members of staff that have really taken this on board and getting involved in the process. I think it's really important as we continue our journey as a cooperative council that we really improve and continue to drive forward the opportunities for staff to collaboratively engage with us and ensure that they are driving forward service change at a local level rather than it being a top-down approach that we might have seen previously. I think this helps our staff ensure that they can be innovative contributors to us as an organisation and really puts them at the heart of everything we do. We'll be developing a new council plan alongside our budget proposals covering the period of 2017 onwards, and consultation on that will begin in early autumn as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Powers. Thank you. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, I'm kind of puzzled by this so-called plan. First, by its timing. We've said in this chamber on many occasions that surely the council plan should come before the annual budget, not the other way around. That's the way it used to be. The budget sets out the resources needed to deliver the plan. So I don't understand why we can't go back to the way it was, although it sounds from Councillor Powers' last comment that maybe you're looking again at the timing, so I'd like your assurance on that. Secondly, and more importantly, its vagueness is absolutely astonishing. Now, I take the Deputy Leader's point that it's not the place to put every bit of detail of everything that the directorates are going to do, but it's absolutely full of platitudes. It's full of statements without any evidence. It's full of ambitions without any idea about how they're going to be achieved. We're going to be the greenest city in Europe. There's a green thread throughout our policies. Just maybe give us one example of how that would suffice. Just one example in the plan of how that's going to be delivered. But there are no examples. Surely a plan says these are the things we are going to do, the specific things we're going to do in the year ahead, how we're going to do it, and by whom we're going to do it. Here's an example. Under employability and skills, and I agree that's very, very important, perhaps the most important thing, it says what we're going to do to make a difference. We're working with young people not in education, employment or training. Great, we're working with them. Then it says, how will we know we're making a difference? It says, we will help more people into work or training opportunities. Well, we hope so, but how? Isn't a plan supposed to tell us how these things are going to be done? There's a section that says we are exploring the feasibility of sharing some services and functions with other local authorities and other bodies. Is that the best you can do? Have we not been talking about this for 2 or 3 years? Is that not what the combined authority is about? Wakey, wakey. Give us a bit of detail. Tell us what's been achieved. Another one. Newcastle is leading the way, showing how council services can be transformed. We are a test bed for new ideas and innovation. It's absolutely self-delusional. Commercialisation in this council is a disaster. We make a loss at most things. We're not profitable. We're supposed to have had a plan months ago. It's not there. We're flogging off buildings and assets. We've stopped all our arts funding. None of this is particularly innovative and aspirational as far as I'm concerned. It says our most innovative approaches are based on public sector partners working together. Well, we scrapped the LSP. The papers for the Newcastle Gateshead initiative aren't in the public domain, and nor are the papers for the meetings that the Chief Executive has with public sector leaders. So how do we know? There has to be some transparency about this. I'm not trying to be pedantic. There's nothing wrong with what's in it. It's what's not in it, and it's not a plan. And let me just say that I don't really understand who it's for. Is it for the staff, for the public, the partners? Is it for us, the councillors? And its lack of detail makes it utterly, utterly useless for the purposes of scrutiny. I'd love the Deputy Leader, in responding to the debate, to say she'd take it away and bring it back to City Council with more detail. And if she won't do that, then I'm afraid we're going to vote against it.
Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As usual, Councillor Faulkner has gone before me and made my key points with passion and eloquence, but here goes regardless. Council may recall I asked the Deputy Leader at the last meeting to ask her which areas of the Council she felt could benefit from improvement. Now, that question was asked without prior notice and was perhaps a little unfair, but it nevertheless made an important point. It would clearly be useful for scrutiny and indeed members of Council generally to have more input into corporate improvements, and I would have hoped the Council plan would identify specific areas for improvement of corporate performance. I'm not sure the plan before us wholly does that. I do find it a little unfortunate that the administration doesn't seem to have gone very far out of its way to consult and involve on this. I recall from days of old that the previous comprehensive performance assessment regime looked carefully at how the council was delivering on its corporate plan. At last, we no longer have rigorous external assessments. So what assurances might the Deputy Leader give council that the performance against this plan will be assessed by peer review if appropriate? And what process of consultation has been followed in producing this plan with councillors and with stakeholders in general? Thank you, Lord Mayor. The covering report is very brief and doesn't really give a lot of information on that, so I just want to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. A couple of comments on this extensive plan. As a simple fellow, I'd like to highlight the contradictions contained in the simple chart on its page 12, how we do things, cooperation in action. Firstly, helping people to help themselves. Quote, we will work closely with community groups to help them take greater control of their neighbourhood, unquote. And yet the Labour Party has swept away the principal way of interacting with all the people, not just approved community groups, by scrapping ward meetings where people can come together and express their concerns about what's going on locally. And it slashed the already reduced budgets whereby groups can be given a little encouragement to do things for themselves. In my own ward of Parklands last year, the award-winning 3-mile allotments have taken on responsibility for filling and maintaining flower tubs on the Great North Road, a northern gateway into Newcastle, with plants that the ward committee paid for. The Scouts have been encouraged to fundraise to recreate an important community facility because we, the council, helped to pay for a new roof. Parklands, East Gosforth and West Gosforth ward committees contributed to support the Friends of Gosforth Central Park, who've taken over swathes of work formerly done by the council. Our ability to do this in future will be much reduced. There's a long list of other projects that I happily share, for which the ward money has received call, and that list will be much shorter in the future. I'd also mention what I prefer to call the digital without choice policy. My ward's demographics has a significant element like me, techno unsure at the best. Yet the council is closing down or reducing all avenues of interaction, like access to pieces in libraries, now with reduced hours, face-to-face potential, hiding the ability to pay by cheque, and that's before we get onto the council's phone system, creaking under the weight of calls because of the other choices that are being eroded. There's a huge gap between the fine words and the practice on the ground, despite the best efforts of our staff who are doing great things for this great city.
Thank you. Councillor Higgins.
Well, I hadn't actually intended to speak on this report, Lord Mayor, but I think for the sake of balance, just a few words from this side of the council chamber might be helpful. I mean, first of all, obviously, it doesn't contain, as the Deputy Leader of Council said, it doesn't contain all the detail, but what this does is it illustrates that it illustrates the fact that despite all the financial challenges that we face, there are still a great number of positive things happening within our communities. And I look forward to the detail about that in the future. But I think that this report does illustrate that we are still trying to maintain many services despite the hardships that we face at the moment. But I just wanted to pick up on one point, and it may well come out in further detail in later reports. And it's probably linked to the motion we've got going to Council about community tensions at the moment in Newcastle related to the Brexit decision and the increase in race hate crime and racist crime within our communities. And when we talk about the kind of city we want, it does refer to the fact that we want to create or maintain our safe city, which has got a tremendous reputation. And to do this, we'd have to work closely with the Northumbria Police. And one of the ways that we did this in our ward of Benwell and Scotswood was by holding regular safe neighbourhood meetings, so-called SNAPS meetings, which unfortunately, for the time being, we've had to terminate because of the financial pressures that we face. But I do know that that situation is being monitored, and in view of recent events, since the EU referendum decision was taken, I wonder whether we should concentrate our minds about introducing safe neighbourhood meetings, which are joint meetings between the council and police, in areas of the city where we might have tensions like Benwell and Scotswood.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Higgins. I now call on Councillor McCarthy, if there's no further speakers, to reply. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you for the comments. It's not really a surprise, Lord Mayor, that the opposition come forward with the same things as they usually raise around us. For some reason, they complain about us being ambitious, and I kind of struggle with that, because even in the current context, I want this city to be ambitious for its future. In relation to the issue that Councillor Faulkner raises about the timing of the paper, as Councillor Powers identified, we are looking at that to try and bring all of the documents together at the same time, because we then think it will, each of the bits of the pack, I guess, can come together and inform one another. And perhaps seeing the vagueness in this document isn't helpful, because obviously we don't have the budget paper in front of us, Lord Mayor, which has a significant amount of the detail of what it is that we're actually doing. I understand what he means about giving examples, but actually the two examples that he shared, young people and employment, we are doing a significant amount of work with young people who are NEET. We've done, actually there's been some really excellent research done by people in wellbeing, care and learning, exploring the reasons for that. And I think that was all included in Councillor Kingsland's report that came to Council. So although it is a one-liner in the plan, I did say this was an overarching plan, high-level plan without detail. The detail will be available if people on scrutiny want to have a look at that. I'm sure they can if they've got nothing else to do. But I do think, Lord Mayor, that the quarterly reports that we bring back do highlight some of the areas that we are measuring, and over a year, colleagues across the Council will see what exactly we are doing. Councillor Faulkner's, I don't know, the rude way he put things about Newcastle leading the way. We are in the forefront of a significant number of areas of work, commercial being one of them, although I appreciate we've not actually had the capacity. We've recently appointed an assistant director to take a lead on that role, and no doubt they will come forward with some plans. Sharing services is not about the combined authority, and as colleagues across the council chamber know, that is sharing services is quite difficult. Discussions take a long time in order to build the trust of colleagues to agree to share the delivery of services, but those discussions are happening in a number of areas. Councillor Stone asked about improvement. I'm clearly not going to, in full council, say where we need to work more effectively, but as I said last time when he raised it, this council has taken on board external assessment peer reviews, the most recent one being around the Wellbeing for Life board. Councillor Ashby misses the point around working cooperatively. We, as he knows, because he's been party to significant cuts to this council, or at least his party have been party to those significant cuts, we've had to take difficult decisions. Some of that is about not being able to support ward work in the way that we did in the past. He raises some important concerns around access to digital, Lord Mayor, and we are trying to address those wherever we can, but he will know austerity does have consequences. Thank you to Councillor Higgins for raising those issues. We did commit, Lord Mayor, when we were looking at this area and changing the way Safer Newcastle meetings in local neighbourhoods, the SNAPS meetings worked, that if we have significant issues, I'm looking to Councillor Kemp around this, but I know that the way we agreed that was that if we've got concerns in our local communities, those meetings can take place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor.
Lord Mayor, I move the report so that we agree that if we can.
Thank you. Is the report agreed? Do we need a vote? Thank you. On to the vote. Yes, 40. No, 13. The report is agreed. Thank you. We now move on to item 7, appointment of an independent members of the Independent Remuneration Panel and independent persons under the Localism Act 2011. I call on Councillor David Wood to move the report, who is going to be seconded by Councillor McCarthy. Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Okay, thank you, Lord Mayor. Before I move the report, can I pay tribute to the input of Donald Williamson, who sadly passed away, which you referred to at the beginning of the meetings. Mr. Williamson was going to stand down anyway, but just like formally pay tribute to his input on the panel. Lord Mayor, can I move the report as set out and answer any questions, or any of the more difficult ones I'll refer to Mr. Softly.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I know these reports tend to go through on the nod, but given the particular interest in governance matters these days, I've kind of been thinking about it a bit more, and I did have some questions. And they're probably questions that perhaps Councillor Wood might need to write to members about, or write to me about. I hope he might share with all members. I'd really like to know who agreed the new job descriptions and person specifications, because we're told that they've been changed. I'd like to know how the people whose names have come forward, did they self-nominate? Do they submit referees? I'd like to know who shortlisted and who interviewed them. And really, I'd like to know more about them. Do they live in Newcastle? What's their experience? I feel that we're not really getting much information about them here, and I'd really appreciate if somebody could share that knowledge with us. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Faulkner. Councillor Wood, reply.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Obviously, I wasn't prepared for any of those questions. Councillor Fulton was agreed. I'll get answers to those questions and circulate to all members of council.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 8, questions by members. We received one question marked for oral reply, which, under Standing Order 9A, is deemed to be put. Councillor Kemp, to reply to the question from Councillor Raymond.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. I have indeed placed on record before the statement you passed to me, and I do state that the service is not fit for purpose, but I would state the comment quite clearly. That is not a criticism of the staff, that's a criticism of the system. Ultimately, I brought a report to Overview and Scrutiny at the end of last year, which outlined our plans and objectives for delivering the service. As you know, that, well, whether you are aware, I'll make sure you get a copy of the report, but the report outlined the progress and the process we're looking at, which incorporates new working standards across the whole of the directorate. As we're well aware, and some people who suddenly have lost interest in the city of Newcastle since their grandstanding, make a point of making reference about refuse collection. That is one element of the whole service. My belief, and I'm often used, the expression is form and function. My belief is that what we get through, we introduce core standards, we understand exactly how they're embedded into the system. What we will then do is review how they work, and we will at that point look at what form and function as a EnviroCall or whatever it will be called. I'm presumed to call it won't be called that because it's somewhat tarnished in its reputation, but we will look at introducing a new system in place once we've actually bedded in the core standards. With that in mind, I'm looking at organising a member working group which will work with Overview and Scrutiny to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Raymond, you have a supplemental question.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Kemp for his answer, and I'd also like to thank his officer team who work in EnviroCall and Peter Gray for putting together the comprehensive information pack that I received not long ago, so thank you for that. Councillor Kemp's acknowledged in previous correspondence and today that he feels the service is not fit for purpose, and he is right. In the last few weeks I've had correspondence from 3 people. One person who spoke to a call handler who told him that she wasn't trained sufficiently to handle his query about refuse collection. I've also spoken to a lady who told me that she had a bad experience using EnviroCall, but when she asked how she could formally complain, was told simply that she couldn't, and this may explain the lowish number of the complaints that are in the data that I received. In addition, Councillor Allen and I received an email from a lady who
had waited 16 minutes for a call to be answered. And then she promptly complained by email and was told by reply that the average wait for that day, 10th of June, was 13 minutes 50 seconds. So I'm not sure if that was supposed to make her feel better, but you know, that was the response. So I welcome Councillor Kemp's review into the service, and I'm sure I'll be interested in getting involved in the member workshop as well. But I think at this moment in time, Councillor Kemp needs to shore up this vital service. So can I ask him that resources and system changes are put in place in the coming days, not weeks, in order to handle the volume of calls and to support his team, who are doing a great job on the ground to deliver the competent service that Newcastle residents are paying for. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Councillor. If the three specific cases, if you want to refer them to me, and we can look into them directly. With regards to putting additional resources, Council agreed a full budget during the budget process. It would be inappropriate to start misdirecting resources to alternative sources when we're actually going to review the whole process. To actually look at the call handling element and the delays in the times, there is an issue with the rather protracted and elongated phone message that begins, which is about 3.5 minutes. That's all been reviewed and curtailed, and the whole process, as I say, it's all part of an ongoing review. I wouldn't agree to put in substantial more staff into phone answering. What we're looking at doing is ensuring that the service on the ground is actually delivered.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. We have two further supplemental questions from other members. None? Oh, Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, can I say to Councillor Kemp that about a year or so ago I actually visited the call centre, and I was very impressed by the way that it operated, talking to the people who were answering the calls, watching them answering the calls, and the way that the management were controlling the whole thing. And I now do not recognise the system that we seem to have now, as opposed to what we had a year ago, and I went on public record at that time saying how well I thought it was all working. And when we have this review, can we have some simple explanation of what went wrong over the last year from what I actually saw and the people that I was talking to and what we're now experiencing?
Councillor Kemp.
Back to my previous comment, which was we will undertake a review. A review will clearly incorporate the failings and the issues that need to be addressed, with answers and proposals about how we would address them, which will incorporate all members who are interested.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Kane.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm getting similar complaints, I'm sure other members do as well, about the length of time that repair call takes to answer the phone. I was wondering if I could ask that the review of EnviroCall and any solutions arising from that could perhaps be, that review could incorporate repair call as well. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Kemp.
I somewhat feel like a staff of EnviroCall repeating the same answer, but yes, we can also incorporate repair call, yes. Thank you.
We have also received one question marked for written reply. This, with the response, has been circulated and also displayed in the foyer. We now move on to item 9 on the agenda, appointments. Are the appointments agreed as set out? Thank you. Moving on to item 10, notice of motion, anti-advocacy clause. I will call on Councillor McCarthy to move the motion, seconded by Councillor Faulkner. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'm really pleased that this is going to, this motion before us this evening is going to receive cross-party support, because I think there are some really important issues in this anti-advocacy clause that the government are introducing. Lord Mayor, I think for the benefit of colleagues across the council chamber, this motion has been drafted by the National Council for Voluntary Organisations. I asked our local, working closely with our partners in the community and voluntary sector, I asked if they had the wording that could then be shared across the country, so it wasn't just coming from Newcastle. And I think that helps us by giving this issue greater status. Lord Mayor, the government are putting in place proposals to introduce an anti-advocacy clause for future grant giving. So funds, the proposal would be that funds couldn't be used by organisations to influence or attempt to influence government or political parties. The detail of the clause is in the motion before us. Lord Mayor, I guess we are all very concerned about the restrictions that would place on people who work for charities, those who are working in charities or local voluntary organisations. Because what charitable and voluntary sector organisations do is focus on particular areas of work, do a significant amount of research in relation to that, learn from that, and then help us to understand what that learning is. And I think quite rightly can lobby us on some of that learning so that we make the right decisions in future. And if they're not able to do that and influence decision makers like us, and as you'll see from the motion, Lord Mayor, although this is a government initiative and primarily it's about not influencing Parliament or the government, it does indicate that local authorities might be included in this kind of broad brush statement. And so in giving grants to local organisations, they would not be allowed, if this clause is to go through, to campaign on behalf of the people they're trying to represent for changes. Now, if I give a real example, we all know that we are trying hard to make sure the city centre is accessible. So we've invested significant amounts of money on the pedestrian areas in Northumberland Street. I know we've got ideas about improving that because actually it's been some years ago since we did that. But if the RNIB or the organisations representing disabled people weren't able to help us to understand what the impact of some of those investments might be, I think that actually would mean that we might make decisions that might not help the wider community. So I think we need to make sure that the government understand that we have concerns about this. I know that the voluntary and community sector across the country have huge concerns about the proposals that are contained within this anti-advocacy clause. And given that the Prime Minister, as this motion includes, signed a compact, we obviously as a local authority, through our voluntary sector liaison group, sign a regular compact with the voluntary sector. The government have done exactly the same thing and it seems to me to be undermining that partnership working by putting forward this proposal. Lord Mayor, I think we would be standing in solidarity with all of the partners in the city who are in the charitable and community and voluntary sector in agreeing this this motion tonight. So I'm delighted that we're able to discuss it. And Lord Mayor, in the interests of those people who want to get to the football, I'll maybe stop there.
I don't believe that for 1 minute, Councillor. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think we've already blown it as far as the football is concerned. I'm very happy to second the motion. Compared to many countries, I think the UK can be really proud of the strength and vibrancy of our civil society, our voluntary sector, charities at the heart of it. It's stronger and more effective, both in the grant-aided work it does, the service contracts that are delivered, and of course increasingly the funds that are raised through training, than in pretty much any other country in the world. And I think the relationship between the government and the charity sector is a really important one that the government should take great care to get right, because of all the many hundreds of thousands of people who work in the sector, the knowledge that they have, the experience of working with service users. How can it possibly be in the government's own interests to say we're not really at all interested in how that information is used to influence or guide policy changes that might be required? So I think it's a self-defeating argument by the government. And I think all too often we see a real lack of understanding in Westminster and Whitehall, really about how the sector works, and some kind of willingness to almost impose change rather than work with it. And that's really illustrated by the fact that the announcement about this anti-advocacy clause was actually not even made in Parliament. It was made outside Parliament. And there's been absolutely no formal consultation whatsoever with the very sector that it affects. So, there's a kind of message there, really. And as Councillor McCarthy said, it's very much against the government's own compact. I'll just read it out. It says, The compact will respect and uphold the independence of the civil society sector to deliver their mission, including their right to campaign, and regardless of any relationship, financial or otherwise, which may exist. So they're kind of ripping it up, really. If you put that in, it's not worth the paper it's written in, that compact, I have to say. So all it's succeeded in doing is actually uniting the whole of a very diverse sector, from Mencap to Oxfam, even to the Girl Guides have all come out against this. And I think we should come out against it tonight, so I'm happy to second it.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Kilgour.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I welcome the fact that the Government has paused in its implementation of this anti-advocacy clause. It would suggest, or at least I would hope, that the Government has realised both the strength of feeling against the clause and the negative impact that implementing it would have. It should be blindingly obvious, as the Deputy Leader of Council has pointed out, that charities must always be able to speak up for their beneficiaries and to campaign within the law, regardless of their funding arrangements. Charities share information with government and local authorities, which is essential to policy making. Those same policies which should benefit the most vulnerable people in our communities. If the government goes ahead and implements this clause, they're cutting off the voice of the voluntary sector. Given that charities so often deliver services for and with people and communities who are the hardest to reach, it's even more important that their voice is heard. On a practical level, as grants to charities are often used to support that same service delivery, it's important that policymakers at a local and national level can hear evidence-based feedback from the front line to further improve both policy and the way in which services are delivered. And yet, the current government would stop this. Indeed, the clause in its current form may effectively prohibit grant-receiving charities from speaking to their MPs about developments in their constituencies, meeting elected politicians to discuss wider issues that the charity's activities have highlighted, giving evidence at select committees, or even, rather ludicrously, responding to the government's own consultations. I'm still not entirely sure what the clause is meant to achieve, since its announcement, as Councillor Faulkner pointed out, was made in Parliament and therefore did not allow for any questions, discussion or clarification. As it stands, the Charity Commission doesn't allow charities to be involved in party political campaigns. Electoral Commission rules mean that charities have to register to be involved in campaigning during election periods, even though they can't, as I say, be involved in party political campaigns. So why even introduce this clause? It would seem to me that at best the anti-advocacy clause is ill-conceived and badly thought through. At worst, it's an attack on charities' freedom of speech and an attempt to stifle criticism and informed debate about the government's policies and their impact on our most vulnerable residents, and therefore must be opposed at every opportunity. I support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Cott.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I've been very encouraged by the responses. Just for the record, I believe that this would be a very reactionary and backward step. Charities are really important for all the reasons that have been mentioned. They don't have recourse to funds from big corporate bodies like a number of other organisations who push particular priorities. Yes, they do push particular priorities, but these are priorities that come from research, and they come from work with vulnerable people, with disadvantaged people, with minorities, from various neighbourhoods. They are our eyes and ears on the ground, and how important are they in Newcastle? We know exactly how important they are because we work very closely with them, and that is replicated elsewhere. I think that all of this does demonstrate a misunderstanding of the role that they have. They're not there to be party politicians, but they need to be able to influence local government, central government and political parties in some way. I don't think that's conflict. I don't think that's a problem. I think that's healthy, because what it does is that information is then digested by government bodies, by local government, central government and political parties, and then it is then developed and so on and so forth. And that's important in a democracy, to have that free flow of information. I don't quite know where all this comes from, but when I was looking for some material to speak tonight, I did notice there was a press statement which was put together by the Minister, Matthew Hancock, which seemed very anti. It
was almost as though he had a bee in his bonnet about this, and maybe there's some ideological issue related to that, I don't know. But I do think it's rather unfortunate, and it does show a lack of understanding of the important role. The issue as well, I'm pleased that someone raised the issue about the government's commitment to working with the voluntary sector. I think it was you, Councillor McCarthy, through their compact arrangements. And of course there was this issue of the big society as well. Well, what's happened to that? We don't hear much of that. But the government, that was David Cameron's big thing, was to work with the voluntary sector, and here yet there's a total misunderstanding of what the voluntary sector is or trying to achieve in this regard, certainly. I know there's actually a pause at the moment, and I'm not too sure what's happening in that pause paper, but I hope that sense will prevail and the government won't then carry forward its proposals in this regard. But charities are so important, we need to work with them, they need to have this advocacy role. It's really important that we show that we're in solidarity with the voluntary sector, both here in Newcastle and across the country. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cott. Councillor Higgins. Councillor Higgins.
I didn't actually indicate to speak, I don't think.
Oh, well, sit down.
Bearing in mind that I'm bearing in mind that I'm half Welsh, then I've got no great desires.
Right, well, sit down quick. Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Our members of Parliament exist in a continually churning environment, rather like a cocktail party, and sometimes without the cocktails. The calls on their time are legion. Often they rely on information from outside the Westminster bubble in order to judge what's good and bad about legislation. For over 20 years, it's been my experience that external inputs are welcome and make their job of representing all of us more effective. So the draconian clause, which includes the catch-all phrase, attempting to influence legislative or regulatory action, would inhibit the passing of information, presumably even the purchase of a postage stamp to send a letter about progress on a grant-aided subject. But I'll give one piece of free advice to lobbyers. Forget the fancy receptions for which the House of Commons authorities will now charge you up to £2,000 just for room hire. They don't work and can bring the process into disrepute, and no doubt the drafters of these proposals are fully aware of them. Our legislature would be much the poorer if an anti-advocacy clause was shoved through, as I join in opposing it.
Thank you. I now call on Councillor McCarthy to reply.
Lord Mayor, just to say thank you to everyone for contributing to the debate. I think the issues that we raised tonight are really important, and I'm really pleased that we can agree this across the Council chamber. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Item 11. Is the motion agreed? Sorry. Motion agreed? Thank you. Item 11, notice of motion. The Government White Paper, Education Excellence Everywhere. I will now call on Councillor Kingsland to move the motion, seconded by Councillor Cott. Councillor Kingsland.
Yeah. Lord Mayor, I'm pleased to be bringing this motion tonight with cross-party support to add to the concerns raised by schools, trade unions and growing numbers of local authorities across the country to certain aspects of the White Paper. I won't say very much about academisation, as my views are well known in this chamber. However, I am concerned about the duty on the Council to improve educational outcomes for Newcastle children when schools become more fragmented and often accountable to organisations based outside the city. I'll say a little more about the national funding formula, which is of great concern to our schools. To date, schools have not had to take cuts as we have, but they still have significant cost pressures, and they've lost funding through changes to in-work benefits, causing a reduction in children being eligible for pupil premium. The details of the formula are not yet known and will have to be published before the end of term if it is to be implemented by April. However, the expectation is that schools which are small and in areas of high deprivation, of which we have a number, will lose out most. Also, we have serious concerns about a lack of funding for the high needs block when we have growing numbers of children with special educational needs and disabilities. I therefore urge Council to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Kingsland. Councillor Cott.
So I'd like to second the motion but reserve the right to speak, if that's okay.
Thank you, Councillor Cott. Councillor Wood.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. First of all, I'd like to declare personal interest in being Chair of Governors at a secondary school in the city. I've been a governor, school governor in Newcastle for many, many years before I came on the council, and take great pride and being able to serve the education department in whichever way I can. We've seen many, many initiatives over the years, but none as destructive as the academy process. Understanding, you know, completely was introduced by the Labour Party originally, wrongly in my opinion, and then carried on by the following governments. And the present government saying that they will academise everywhere by 2020, what that's done is it's led to schools getting worried now of having academisation forced on them, and then having to look for different partners to academise. Currently there are 4 secondary schools in the city, I think, which haven't academised. 2 of those are currently consulting on academisation. I'm not sure on the other 2. But what can happen, and is happening, certainly in the east end of the city, is that there's currently a consultation process going on for the academy by the Church of England. If it's accepted, then all of the primary schools in one area will be run by the Church of England. Now, I'm not saying, you know, church schools are wrong, whatever, but local residents have to have a choice. And as I say, currently this one particular consultation process takes in 4 primary schools and 1 secondary school. And the argument the Church of England is putting forward, saying that there will be no change within the ethos of any school, but the member board that's running the academy will still be the majority of Church of England. It's written in the Church of England Constitution. Now, as I say, there is a place for church schools, but local residents have to have a choice for where their children and parents go. So I know the local council has, the authority has objected to this, as has the local members and the local member of parliament and the trade unions as well. But it's still going through. There is currently, from yesterday, I had an email to say that the second phase of this consultation process is going on, and there will be no choice for people. There will be no parental choice. Now, academies are taking away the role of the local authority. Very, very sadly, that is, where the local authority will end up with a very, very small part to play. But you can bet your bottom dollar that the local populace will still be looking towards the authority for advice and help whenever things go wrong. I mean, I don't know, it's probably too late now to change things, but certainly we have to have this in mind, and I would encourage any member in here who's not a school governor is get involved in school governance and see how you can help. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. John.
Chair, Councillor Wood did seek advice on that point, and I advised that I did not say there was any need to declare an interest. Your governorship should be registered on your register of interest, and that is sufficient notice.
Thank you. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Notwithstanding what John Softley just said, I'll just say I am a governor of North Fordham Primary School, falling into exactly the category that Councillor Kingsland's just mentioned, a very small primary school in a high deprivation area, and extremely vulnerable, not just to the new national funding formula, but to the changes that have happened from the academic year that's just ending to the one that's just to begin. And I don't know members understand this, but in North Fordham Primary School, we have lost 11% of our income from one year to another. 11% of our income. And that's because of the changes to the high needs block. We're a school with an ARC, we're extremely challenged pupils. It requires one-to-one teacher support, and increasingly this is not recognised in the formula. And actually one of the interesting side effects of this is that pupil premium, perhaps one of the things we can all agree was a good thing that came out of the coalition, is becoming an increasing percentage of the total income of the school. It's now 18% of the income of North Forden Primary School. That's something to think about. If that were to end, you know, the school would virtually sink. Relating it to the other point in the motion, on the general thrust of the motion, which I do agree, I have to say that North Forden has almost completed the process of going into an academy trust. I actually call it a multi-school academy trust because the schools still will have a relationship with the local authority, but the schools, particularly small ones like North Forden, are worried about their vulnerability to forced academisation, partly because of, you know, how can we always sustain, with reducing resources, the academic achievement of the pupils, and what if we don't? One setback and we'll be forced down an academy process. So working with other schools where you can share resources, where you can share expertise, is actually a sensible way forward. I went into it and agreed to it as a governor with a certain degree of trepidation, but nonetheless I could see some powerful arguments about it. And I have to say that not everything that this local authority's education service provides is as well regarded as you might always think it is. And I will certainly tell you that the financial support to schools, helping them understand what's happening to their finances and budget, is not very good at all. And one of the big pluses of working in a trust is that will become much better. And it will become more important as time goes by that we actually understand the money that we've got and how we use it. But I am concerned in something, again, that's mentioned in the motion, that one of the things that worries us as a set of governors is that we might end up talking more about structure and process of trusts and academies than we actually talk about the education of the children, which is why we're there in the first place. So notwithstanding what might sound but aren't caveats, I do support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Faulkner. Councillor Ashby.
Lord Mayor, the point in the motion about the removal of parent governors is particularly well made. Parents have a wide range of expertise, experience and insights which can help a governing body give guidance to head teachers. Without it, an important link to the community which schools serve will be severed. Like good non-executive directors in public companies or independent members of some of our committees, they should be able to speak up when the need arises. As Councillor Faulkner has mentioned, one of the most important contributions that the Liberal Democrats made in government was the pupil premium, broadly related to levels of deprivation. I was fascinated to read on the websites of Gosforth schools the uses to which they had put the money and the extra results achieved. And I'm sure it was the same elsewhere in the city. It demonstrated clearly that extra money does make a difference, and also that schools must be accountable in some way in the space between their gates and the Department for Education in Whitehall.
Thank you, Councillor Ashby. Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I wanted to speak on this motion not because I disagree with it. I don't. I agree with the points it makes, but I wanted to raise some other issues which I don't think the motion sufficiently directly addresses. The motion makes it clear there are good grounds for opposing the government's white paper and education agenda, and it makes pertinent points relating to fair funding, and I very much agree with those sentiments. But what I feel is missing from the motion is a degree of recognition that the world is moving on with regard to academies. The administration has made it clear that it doesn't favour academisation, but the reality is in Newcastle that a number of schools have pursued this course already, and several more are considering doing so. So the administration's view doesn't seem to be shared by those schools. Yes, it is true that local authorities have an important role to play in education, but I'm not clear that the administration's vision for education in the city is sufficiently developed. There is an ongoing role for LEAs in raising attainment, in planning of school places, in planning of new school capacity. On this side of the chamber, we're conscious that attainment isn't quite as good as we might want it to be in the city, as confirmed by the recent Ofsted letter. And we also note there's been a lack of senior officer capacity in this regard, which has only recently been addressed. We note that whilst there may well be legitimate concerns to express on academies on the white paper and on funding, but we would also welcome more clarity on what the administration's strategy on education is. We know the world may not be as we'd like it to be, but we'd also welcome greater clarity on what the plan for addressing this will be. I confess that I personally am not very clear on this at the minute, and other members may feel the same. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Councillor Cott.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Well, I think this is a very timely motion, and I'm in full sympathy with Councillor Kingston's view. I'm actually pleased the government has rolled back a little bit from its enforced academisation proposal, but it is just a little bit. It's clear that there will be more academies, and there will be difficulties that will follow from this, as Councillor Kingston has said in her motion. Of course, not everything is bad about the White Paper. There is provision for the development of collaborative working between schools to share resources and practice, to ensure better commissioning and provision of alternative provision, to improve accountability of local academy trusts as well, and to confirm the role of the local authority in particular areas. But, and that's the key thing, it will be harder to achieve some of these things in the way in which the government is undertaking this, with this particular agenda. As Councillor Kingland's motion makes clear, academisation will continue. This will mean more power in the hands of civil servants in Whitehall, DFE, and the remote hands of the regional schools commissioners. Parents will no longer be required as part of the governing bodies of schools, and I personally feel that this is a negation of 140 years of local control of schools, and I think this is fundamentally wrong. The removal of local authorities from involvement in school improvement by 2017 removes partnership and challenge in supporting schools. Involvement of local authorities means an open conversation about promoting high standards. Not having their involvement perhaps could encourage lack of transparency and external scrutiny. Much more accountable. Local authority is much more accountable in its relationships than some of these official bodies that lie behind some of these new arrangements. It is also unclear what the multi-academy trust is actually a better agent for school improvement. Good local authorities, such as in Newcastle, obviously provide support for things like performance data, exclusions and attendance, which are all really important in Newcastle, as we know. The local authority is the honest broker, I think, between schools, and it can broker arrangements in all sorts of different ways to challenge particularly issues like underperformance. And they have knowledge and are democratically accountable. So these things need to be put in mind. Local authorities, as it says in the motion, will continue to be under pressure to work to achieve more academies. They will have to hand over into these new proposals. The Secretary of State can actually seize local land and hand it to academy trusts. Of course, that could frustrate not only educational arrangements, but community planning and place shaping of the local authority. The further creation of academies and free schools, for that matter, will frustrate responsibilities the local authority has for school place planning, for protocols on hard-to-place pupils, and, of course, support for disadvantaged and vulnerable children. I think it's really important that we focus on the funding issues. I'll just say one more thing about that, if that's okay, Lord Mayor. The funding issue mentioned is very significant. Let me also draw attention to the IFS analysis, which points to the steepest cuts to secondary school funding since the 1970s, points to a 7% cut funding per pupil by 2020. And I would mention that. And I would also mention the fact that in any new arrangements, I'm coming to a close, in any new arrangements, it's not enough to simply say that we have to have a level playing field based on a number of measures determined by the authority, which are normally related to, by the government, which are normally related to things like population. There are measures of deprivation by geographical area that we need to take into consideration. And the pupil premium, finally, Lord Mayor, is an important part of what needs to be there, but it is not the only thing which needs to underpin funding for deprivation. Sorry to go over my time, but thank you for your forbearance.
Thank you. I now call on Councillor Kingston to reply.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Quite a lot of things, so apologies if I don't pick up on everything. Just starting from the comment that was made about the conversion of schools. It's disappointing and sad to me that schools do feel pressured to go down this route. We very much encourage collaboration through trusts. I'm not convinced that trusts then becoming multi-academy trusts make any difference to the educational outcomes for children. But we all recognise these are Newcastle children, and we want to work collaboratively with all schools in the city, which is why we set out our policy statement in the annual education report, which said the circumstances in which we would be prepared to support an application for an academy or free school where there's a demonstrable need, there is no financial impact on the council, and where the schools are prepared to meet teachers' paying conditions. So we have made that very clear. We're not completely blinkered to the fact that schools are converting and that we need to be able to work with them. In terms of the vision for the city, I think that was quite clearly set out in the Learning Challenge. Clearly that has ground to a halt somewhat because we have been under-resourced, but we've now appointed a new assistant director, and he is going to be leading on that, and I'm hoping that come the autumn we will have a report that gives a little more focus to what we will be doing in the future. Totally agree with Councillor Faulkner that schools, particularly schools with ARCs, are under significant pressure and will be more so. Under the current formula, we've been able to move money from the schools block to prop up the high needs block. We don't think we're going to be able to do that anymore, so we're going to be significantly underfunded for high needs, and I don't think there's a recognition that we have so many children who have very specialist needs in Newcastle. So there's quite a lot of issues there. I agree with pretty much everything Councillor Cott has said. It would have made the resolution about 4 pages long if we'd added everything, but I think the sentiment is there, so thank you all for your comments.
Thank you, Councillor Kingsland. Is the motion agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We now move on to item 12, notice of motion, bin dispute arbitration. I will call on Councillor Ashby to move the motion, seconded by Councillor Graham. Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The collection of waste bins in Newcastle has been in chaos for nearly 3 months now. The Labour administration seems to be paralysed about what to do. Tonight we propose that the Council quickly seeks arbitration, discussion, conciliation, whatever you care to call it, by an outside body. The alternative of reverting to the previous system seems unlikely, so we don't suggest it, but doing up nothing is not an option. At the moment, the situation seems akin to that under a previous Labour Prime Minister, Jim Callaghan, during the winter of discontent, when the bins went unemptied and the dead unburied, while all he could say was, crisis, what crisis? And that's all we've been hearing from the Labour Cabinet about the disastrous implementation of their cunning plan. Almost every day since the 21st of April, we've had an update on the Council's website on more uncollected bins, so much so that there's now a red flash on the front page showing off Labour's shame to the world on what should be a primary shop window for this Council. When I looked this morning, it was to see that green domestic bins have been missed in Fordham, Kenton, West Gosforth and Wilsington wards, blue recycling bins, the ones through which we are trying to encourage local people to recycle and reduce landfill, had been missed in the previous wards plus Castle. The brown garden waste bins, the one which people are paying a premium in addition to their council tax for, seemed to have picked up in Wilsington but missed in the other 4. Last Friday, one sort of bin or another had been missed in Blakelaw, Elswick, East Gosforth, Fenham, Walker, Walkergate, West Gosforth, Westgate and Wingrove. Every day, in a ward represented by councillors here tonight, one or more bin collection is missed. My own ward of Parklands is not on these particular roll calls, but overflowing bulk bins at sheltered accommodation have been missed out several times. Other speakers might like to add to this catalogue of incompetence, including problems with assisted lifts. There are 2 sorts of costs to be paid. The loss of reputation by Labour is one I can live with, but the impact on the lives of our constituents cannot be ignored, nor the completely justified contempt for an administration that can't even do one simple thing. They're rightly angry about the additional costs, up to £5,000 a week for the Council for weekend emptying, and the £20 they pay for a brown bin service, which the Council isn't providing adequately. Our streetscapes are littered with bins left out in the hope of collection on another day, and sometimes by wind-blown litter from bins that have been overfilled, which is happening when collections cannot be relied upon. I understand that Labour councillors aren't any too happy either, so feel free to represent your constituents out loud tonight and support this straightforward motion for action on, rather than neglect of, the problem. I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Ashby. Councillor Graham. Thank you. Councillor Kay.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. One of the particular problems arising out from this is it's clear whatever system has been put in place to try and pick up the missed bins isn't working. And as well as the list we get from officers every week listing the streets that have not been collected, we find every so often that there are streets and blocks which have not been collected which aren't on that list, so they don't get a collection the next day. This is causing real problems. I've had people on the phone complaining about maggots in their bins, having to clear all that out. Bins are going uncollected for weeks. We've been relatively lucky that the temperature's been relatively mild, but if they do start to rise for the next couple of weeks, if this isn't resolved, it is going to get very bad indeed. So I fully support the motion and think that a speedy resolution of this problem would be very welcome. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you, Councillor Kane. Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm speaking this evening to oppose the motion put forward by Councillor Ashby, which is both incorrect in referring to a dispute and misleading with regard to the ongoing situation over bin collections in the city. It is a continuation, of course, of the misleading statements made by Councillor Donnelly in the lead-up to the recent local elections, which completely misrepresented the reality of the situation and were made purely out of political opportunism without ever offering any constructive suggestions of his own. It does not surprise me, therefore, that Councillor Ashby and others on that side of the chamber have followed his lead, which is very much in keeping with their selective bouts of amnesia about the cuts inflicted upon us by their recent coalition government and the difficult decisions that this has forced upon the Labour administration. This has led to cuts of almost £1 million in localised services and job losses in many areas. In his role as Cabinet member, Councillor Kemp has therefore set about the challenging task not only of maintaining our level of service with regard to bin collections, but also protecting jobs in the public sector so badly hit in recent years. As a strong trade unionist myself, I am delighted that Councillor Kemp has conducted his discussions around changes in working practices following the fullest consultation with the trade unions involved with our workforce. I am aware that this dialogue is ongoing and that measures have been taken in the interim to minimise the level of disruption to those residents who have been affected by the tensions created by the recent changes in working practices. Just like so many of my colleagues, I have received a number of complaints from local residents in my area whose bins have not been collected, and these concerns are fully understandable. However, when I have then explained to many of these residents the reason for the current upheaval and the changes to working practices that we are seeking to introduce, I have received wholehearted support and understanding of the challenges that we face and the measures that we need to take in the future. Might I therefore suggest to Councillor Ashby and his colleagues, who constantly seek to run down our city and carp on about bins, litter and other environmental issues, that they might wish to follow the example of those of us on this side of the chamber by explaining to our residents the financial challenges that we face and work constructively with our communities and our workforce to maintain the standards that we all desire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think this is one area where the council, there is clearly financial pressure on the city. We do all acknowledge that, but this is clearly an issue which is not controlled by Whitehall. This is controlled at the Civic Centre, and we are getting increasingly frustrated about the length of time that is taking to resolve this situation. And I think it is worth noting that our residents are all concerned about this. Most of the city has been affected by problems in waste collection, and there is a reasonable expectation on the part of our constituents that they pay council tax for a service which is not being delivered effectively. And when we see discussions in the Chronicle and others, when this has been discussed, senior management of the council have suggested that they have no answers to why the problems are persisting, and they are giving us no confidence that this problem is being sorted out. That is not good enough, and it is our job as councillors, Rob, to speak up and raise concerns about this and to put forward a sensible solution for resolving them. And it's a shame that you don't accept that, and I think it's really unfortunate that there seems to be a dismissive attitude attitude on your part and perhaps on the part of your colleagues about this problem. I would raise one more particular point. I'm aware of particular problems in my ward regarding the brown bin collection service, although I'm also aware of problems in general in terms of both the general waste collections and also in terms of the general lack of responsiveness in terms of street cleaning and in terms of emptying of street bins, which in many parts of the city are full to overflowing and adding to the problem of unsightliness and litter on our streets. But in particular about the brown bin service, residents who participate in that scheme are paying an extra premium for having that service delivered, and they're not having it delivered at the moment, not effectively, not regularly. And I think in any other line of business, if you receive the level of service you're as a paying customer that you were getting from the council, you would be complaining vigorously to the customer services representatives of that organisation. And as we've heard already from Councillor Kemp tonight, the environmental system is not fit for purpose, and we are not getting the adequate level of customer service we expect for our taxpayers and our residents. And I really do hope that the council, on a cross-party basis, will recognise that this is not good enough and will actually make some steps tonight to sort this out, because it cannot continue the way it's going. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I like Councillor Higgins, I get on well with him, but I think what he said just a few minutes ago was quite outrageous. And it was a complete smokescreen to cover the inaction and the disgraceful performance, really, of the council in trying to resolve this. And to say that we're running down the city, you know, we could have made political capital out of this a long time ago. Here we are, many months on, and we're bringing a motion now to council, and a motion that you have just admitted, and certainly we know that our residents are extremely concerned about. And what's accentuated it is that at scrutiny the other day, the director responsible came and said, I don't know the way out of this. I don't know the way forward. And of course, did Councillor Higgins give us a way forward? Has Councillor Kemp given us a way forward? No, we can't find a way to resolve it. Now, there is not a formal dispute in the ACAS sense, but of course there's a dispute. You know, in the Oxford English Dictionary use of the word dispute, you don't agree. Management and staff reps don't agree. And you don't have to go to ACAS for arbitration. Look at the website of Labour Relations Agency. It'll give you a whole host of independent arbitration agencies that you can go to. And we're saying tonight that it's about time you did, because if you don't know how to fix it, and you're going to come back to the next council meeting, which is until September, the one after that, with the same story, don't knock us, you're just running the city down. It's not good enough. You have made a cock-up. You should never have introduced it without being clear that you had agreement. I asked the question, why was that? Did the leader know? Did the chief executive know? I had no answer to that. I sympathise with the problems that the staff, the management are having. I sympathise with the problems that Councillor Kemp's having to deal with. They're not of your making personally. But you've got to give us something better than what Councillor Higgins has just given us.
Councillor Cook. Councillor Cook. Wait for your mic. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Notwithstanding what Councillor Faulkner has just said, the reality is there is actually no dispute, and there was agreement, as far as I understand, before the introduction of the service. So the motion refers to arbitration. And again, notwithstanding what Councillor Faulkner said, arbitration between who and whom. And I just referred to the report, to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which does point to the way, in spite of what he says, about how this dispute ought to be resolved. It's right at the end of the report. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Graham, you reserve the right. Councillor Kemp, Councillor Graham. Councillor Graham, Councillor Kemp, I'm calling Councillor Kemp. Right. Please, can I call Councillor Kemp first? Please, thank you.
Lord
I wasn't
Mayor,
very clear, I apologise, Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I reject the motion for its factual accuracy on the basis of the dispute. I reject the notion, and I find it entirely unhelpful, and not recognising the role and recognition of staff and Cabinet members and others involved in looking at introducing working services which were part of a budget process which were agreed by full council. Discussions and debate took place with this new process since October. I think the motion is entirely unhelpful. The peddling that a council who's chosen to leave the council chamber, despite it being his raison d'etre until now, he's got a new one about making mischief. Causing issues a dispute when they're not a dispute is not helpful. Arbitration is not wanted nor needed, and both the branch secretaries of the two trade unions have told me both personally this morning they would reject it because it would automatically turn the situation into a dispute, and the dispute then will be a reconciliation and arbitration into a dispute being a dispute, which is nonsense. Much work is going underway. In fact, yesterday and the day before, there was 41 bins missed collection. So bins are being collected. So please, bear with us. We are working incredibly hard. Significant interventions are taking place. And on that basis, I reject the motion.
Councillor Graham, thank you.
Notwithstanding this breach in protocol, I'm quite happy for it to go straight to the vote.
No. Councillor Graham, you were seconded, and Councillor Ashby has the right to reply. Thank you. Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for the contributions of all members to this debate. We're having some logic chopping going on here, that we are misrepresenting the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is the bins aren't being emptied and haven't been emptied properly for nearly 3 months. And frankly, however, the contention that people accept their bins not being emptied when they understand is quite absurd. And as to running down the city, clearly it's Labour who's running down the city by its poor performance on the streets, and that being reflected on its website. So what we still haven't heard, what are you going to do? Working hard, well, fantastic, I'm delighted to hear it, but you still have no resolution after nearly 3 months. We need some action this day, and that is why I'm proposing this motion.
Thank you, Councillor.
Criticism from Councillor Ashby on the purpose of actually introducing information, sharing information on a website, which was one of the first requests we were made about making sure people were kept informed. So please don't criticise when the information is being given to assist you in your role as a local member.
Right. Can I move? Can I move? Councillors, can I move? Can we agree this motion? Can we move to the vote? 10 people, please. Ring the bell. Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Name vote. Yes, 13. No, 34. The motion falls. Thank you. Is this the one for the pins or is it 14? Right. 13. We now move on to Notice of Motion 13, Repairing Community Relations. Some of you, before we start, will note that there was safety pins being handed out this evening at the entrance to council. These safety pins are for a campaign that has been started asking people to wear an empty safety pin as a badge to symbolise solidarity against racism and let any potential targets know that the wearer is a friendly face. As a city of sanctuary, we would encourage all Newcastle City councillors to join this campaign and wear this safety pin to show solidarity against racism. I now call upon Councillor Faulkner to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. And can I first of all say I'm very happy to accept the amendment as a friendly amendment. I actually drafted this motion and shared it with a number of people in this chamber just 2 or 3 days after the terrible murder of Joe Cox by a man who was clearly overwhelmed by xenophobia and hate, and who may or may not have been sent over the tipping point by the charged atmosphere of the referendum debate, especially the disgraceful playing of the immigration card in a very inflammatory and racist way by significant elements of the Leave campaign. And it was epitomised, of course, by that terrible breaking point poster unveiled by Farage and by the utter misrepresentation and outright lies peddled by his ilk. And of course, there was an immediate legacy of that in our city with the appalling demonstration at the monument the weekend after the Leave vote, giving the impression somehow nationally that this city is not a city of welcome and of tolerance, when in fact the opposite is true. So this has, of course, got much worse following the 23rd of June vote. I think Brexit has helped in the minds of people who are inimical to the cause of diversity and tolerance and multiculturalism. It's helped make them feel legitimised. It's helped kind of normalise their bigotry and the views of very much hardened towards immigration and multiculturalism, and maybe particularly towards the Muslim community. And of course, we know, sadly, that hate crime has increased almost 5-fold in the last 2 weeks, according to police sources. And this surge in racism has prompted the Prime Minister to tell Parliament last week that the government would be publishing a new hate crime action plan. And the monitoring of the far right is currently undertaken by the National Counter-Terrorism Policing Operations Centre, and they're doing daily assessments, and so they need to, and they have maybe around 2,500, 3,000 people on their books, hardcore right-wing individuals. And I'm worried about them, and I hope the police can deal with them, but I'm worried about it seeping into the wider population who have been influenced by the rhetoric of recent times. What this motion attempts to do, apart from highlighting a very difficult situation for it, is to try and move the narrative away from the terrible negativity that I'm just referring to into one of kind of solidarity and celebration of inclusiveness and diversity, which I think has been a hallmark in this city. And we know that the More in Common initiative has raised a lot of money and stimulated a number of initiatives nationally, and we might choose to be part of that as individuals, as parties, as a city. But the motion specifically asks for us to try and do what we did with the Syrian refugee issue and some other issues in times past, of bring together people of goodwill in the city to discuss how we would respond and to agree what I call a set of practical actions. What are we actually going to do about it, rather than just what are we going to say about it? It needs to, in my view, be something, and I know that Hope Not Hate are very active, and there was a very interesting collection of organisations that worked a couple of 3 weeks ago, on the Soweto anniversary event, and they're probably organisations that would want to be part of this. But I hope it's more than just the, I don't mean disrespectfully the usual suspects, but things which end up with trots with banners and all the rest of it, which can be quite alienating to many other people. I really like something that works with many different agencies in our city, and it needs to be something that I think there has to be a degree of individual leadership by all of us as councillors, irrespective of whether we live in a particularly diverse part of the city or not. The motion asks Council to endorse the bringing together of people of goodwill and organisations in the city, and perhaps to bring back through Cabinet or to a future City Council a very specific action plan. I know that the Chief Legal Officer might say, well, that implies some cost. Well, we don't know. It might just be the way we conduct our personal lives and our role as advocates of peace and inclusiveness in our communities and in our everyday life. But however it's done, I hope we might have the endorsement of Council tonight, and I'm sure we will.
Thank you, Councillor Faulkner. Councillor Raymond, a second.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm very pleased to second this motion, particularly to follow someone with Councillor Faulkner's proud record in this area. There are several things about the last few weeks that have been disappointing. The implications of a UK vote to leave the EU have been right up there. However, the one thing that sickened me most was that image of the National Front supporters peddling their messages of hate in the centre of our city, and the fact that they felt emboldened by the result of the referendum to go and do this. It's also sad to see the increase in hate crime, which Councillor Faulkner alluded to in his speech. Any crime of such nature is abhorrent and intolerable. And mine and other members' contacts from residents since the referendum points to a growing unease and in some cases fear amongst those members of our community who are either EU or non-EU immigrants, working, studying, or in other ways contributing to the prosperity and diversity of our great city. There are sections of our community who, as a result of the national vote to leave the EU, are feeling undervalued and afraid. And that this has happened is a call to action from those of us in Newcastle who see the value that this group of people bring to the city in so many ways. And it's a mark of how great this city is that our business and other public leaders have responded, as instead of saying how it will all blow over and be okay, many have chosen to come out with a big positive message around how valued these members of our community are and how they're absolutely necessary to our daily life and ongoing prosperity. Leading the charge was Chris Brink, Vice-Chancellor of Newcastle University, who put out a statement celebrating the EU and non-EU staff and students at the university, concluding that, and to quote, "With diversity comes quality." And these are very wise words, borne out by the fact that much of the university's pioneering work is done in Newcastle by multinational teams of experts. I've always been proud to be an alumni of Newcastle University, but never so in the last 2 weeks. Similar statements have also come from Newcastle hospitals and a number of local businesses, both large and small. And I attended a meeting last week of local business and city leaders here at the Civic. And it's clear from those discussions that the Council has a role to play, for which I'm sure there's a will on all sides, to amplify this big positive message that we're a tolerant, diverse city of opportunity that is, regardless of the referendum, open for business. And it's at times like this that we're judged by our actions, not by our words, and I'm sure as a council will not be found wanting. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Raymond. And might I note, this is Councillor Raymond's maiden speech, so congratulations. Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to propose an amendment to Councillor Faulkner's notice of motion. Originally, Lord Mayor, we were going to second the original motion and bring our parts of this motion separately, but it seemed sensible to merge the two together. I also wanted to congratulate Councillor Raymond on his maiden speech, Lord Mayor. Well done. So I'm pleased that you noticed that too. A number of us, Lord Mayor, attended the event to celebrate Joe Cox's life, which was organised at really short notice by the MPs in the city. And I will say to Council, I do have, Chiomura gave me copies of both Hansard reports of the debate about Joe Cox's life. And I think I echo what you said in your earlier statement, Lord Mayor. Not many of us would have known her, apart from maybe when we saw her on television in her contribution to the Syrian refugee crisis. She made a really excellent intervention at that point. If anybody would like to see those, Lord Mayor, we'll keep those in the Leader's office. By all means, borrow them and have a read about what her colleagues said about her. Can I also, Lord Mayor, just thank the councillors from Jesmond, Kerry Alibi and Arlene Ainsley, for organising the safety pins for us tonight. I don't know where Kerry is. I know Arlene isn't present. But just to say thank you, we do, I know, right across the council chamber, we want to raise awareness about racism, and it is a small but noteworthy thing to do. Lord Mayor, Newcastle is a really safe city. We do work in partnership with the police and with voluntary sector and community sector partners. We are welcoming and friendly. I don't think that's just our view, you know, as residents of the city, having lived here for a long time. It's also the view of many, many visitors. It's the view of tourists. And also, I think, which is relevant to Councillor Faulkner's original motion, refugees and asylum seekers who move here to rebuild their lives tell us that as well. People do get on in the city, neighbours, friends in local communities, people in faith groups and in other community venues. They do get on well together, and I think we all celebrate that. I think being a city of sanctuary helps us to recognise that. I think the work that was done in relation to the City of Sanctuary recognition from the grassroots in the city helped us to achieve that. And like Councillor Faulkner, Lord Mayor, and I'm sure most colleagues in this room, we've been horrified by the huge rise in hate crime incidents that have been reported to both the police and to the media. The stories we're hearing about children in schools being asked when they're going home, or people being challenged in the street, people who are concerned about their neighbours, those people who live in our city contribute. You know, I spoke to someone on the doorstep in relation to the European referendum campaign who are really worried following a Brexit vote about what their status might be in the future. And what we need to do, Lord Mayor, is come together, be united in sending a really solid, positive message that Newcastle continues to be welcoming. We will continue to do our best to respond to hate crime. We're all horrified by the incidents that are occurring. And Lord Mayor, we've been very careful in the wording of this, because I think Councillor Faulkner is right about this. It is about us individually contributing to that and challenging that where we think it's appropriate. But you'll be aware that in the amendment we have said where you feel safe to do so, because I'm not suggesting you're on your own with a bunch of people who are racist or worse, and trying to challenge that on your own. But I think, you know, as we saw by the incident that happened on the Tyne and Wear Metro not very long ago, where everyone together challenged the people who were being racist to those young women, you know, we can show that we are united. We can condemn the incidents as they occur and reinforce our belief and perception that this city is a safe place to be, and that we will all do our bit to ensure that it stays that way. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McGarvey. Councillor Kemp. Councillor Kemp. Second.
I won't keep people. I think the message that I conveyed as the Chair of Safe Newcastle immediately after the referendum says everything, and it is the point about being vigilant as individuals. We have a role about the well-being and health of all the citizens of Newcastle, wherever they come from and whatever they do. And I think it's really about being vigilant, being safe, being proud of the city that we represent, and conveying all the positive messages. Thank you,
Councillor.
Formally second.
Thank you. Councillor Ashby. I know.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In support of this motion, I draw attention to a report published this morning by Faith Matters, which says that in the last year, before the latest upsurge, there'd been an over 300% increase in street-based anti-Muslim incidents, especially but not limited to London, the West Midlands and the North West. The online world is, it says, a driver which is resulting in a typical perpetrator online being a teenager rather than people up into their 30s. And perhaps 40% of online cases involve far-right sympathisers. It's clear from the anecdotes we're all hearing about that the Brexit vote is bringing out the worst in some people. In some ways, it's open season for anybody with a different name, a different accent or a different skin colour. Xenophobia has been stoked up for political ends. It's this sort of denigration of the other that was the heart of the Nazi capture of Germany, when vitriol and violence against the individual culminated in genocide. Somehow, the pursuit of political gain, and I'm delighted to see that several of the leaders are getting their comeuppance, has legitimised the idea that because people voted narrowly to leave the EU, now any immigrant who hasn't left the country is fair game for insults or violence. I call to mind that my late business partner was a refugee from expansionist Germany who served this country flying with the RAF, and after his return to his native Czechoslovakia, fled the Soviet takeover to come to settle, work and build a business here in Newcastle. He never lost his accent. From time to time, a young Geordie would ask him, "How long have you been here?" To which his answer was, "Longer than you." We have immigrants here from other parts of the country, like me, and immigrants from other countries who helped to build a better Newcastle. In the 800th year of our morality, let's broadcast the message to everybody that most of us in the city today are descended from immigrants of some sort. I support the motion and its supportive amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Councillor Kilgour.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Falconer and Councillor McCarthy, for bringing the original motion and amendment to Council tonight. I don't think anyone in this chamber believes that every Leave voter is racist or anti-immigration, not at all. However, the referendum and the debate around it has changed the political climate in this country, hopefully only for the short term, to such an extent that the far right have felt emboldened and able to peddle their xenophobic poison. I read yesterday that reported crime in London has increased by 50% since the referendum. 50%. And while I'm pleased to see that Newcastle hasn't seen a corresponding spike in hate crime, I'm sure we've all heard anecdotal evidence of an increase, certainly of verbal assaults. A Polish woman living in Britain for 7 years was quoted in an independent article on Sunday as saying, "Like many people, I feared the EU referendum result would cause an increase in intolerance, racism and discrimination, but I didn't think it would become so aggressive and be so immediate." As has been mentioned already, we saw an anti-immigration demonstration in Newcastle only last weekend. We mustn't let this vocal minority, and they are a minority, be the only voices heard in this city. I'm pleased to say that the demonstration at the weekend was drowned out by ordinary shoppers joining the counter-demonstration who agreed that refugees are welcome here. The far-right anti-immigration rhetoric is abhorrent, and we need to stand together and be clear that they do not speak for Newcastle. To reiterate Councillor McCarthy's point, Newcastle is a friendly, welcoming, warm and inclusive city, a city of sanctuary, and we welcome those who come here to live, work, study, relax, or who are seeking refuge. We need only remember our response to the Syrian refugee crisis and the numbers of people who wanted to help those in greater need than themselves to see that this is a caring city. I'm proud that Newcastle Council signed up to the government's Syrian Vulnerable Persons Relocation Scheme and that we've helped 11 families so far. My local secondary school, Kenton, is, I understand, seeking to become a school of sanctuary, a wonderful testament to the inclusive and caring nature of our young people and the school. We must build on these examples and continue to work together as councillors, residents, with our communities and partners to stamp out hate crime and support its victims. I support the recommendations and the amendment, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Schofield.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is a friendly amendment that supports and strengthens the motion and so should be supported. Last night, several of us from across the chamber learned from the Imam of the Central Mosque of the increase in racism experienced by worshippers in the mosque and his very great concern for their safety in the city. There is other anecdotal evidence growing, and we have been asked in our ward by residents to be part of making the strong statement that was coming in council tonight. Last week, I attended a special iftar, i.e. breaking fast, for unity and peace as part of Ramadan in my ward. It was attended by over 100 people from different communities, council officers, voluntary groups, and a lot of children. It was very important that the Syrian families who have come to Newcastle were included in that evening, and they made a very special speech at the end, say how much they appreciated being part of the celebration of Iftar and the friendship and solidarity they experienced that evening. It was always going to be a moving and inclusive evening, but it was given greater significance because of the rise of hate crime and language and actions following the EU referendum result. I had the privilege of joining religious and community leaders who all spoke eloquently, welcoming refugees and condemning hate crimes, all forms of racism and all oppression. It is very hard to overstate the impact on everyone of the leaders from the Muslim, Jewish and Christian and non-religious leaders standing together and speaking with one voice, promoting unity over division and solidarity over intolerance and hate. I do hope the results of that evening and the outcomes from it can be built on to bring together individuals and organisations to endorse the practical actions for the positions that are set out in the motion, but particularly in the amendment. I support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Councillor Cook.
I agree with something that's said by a Tory minister or a former Tory Prime Minister. Sir John Major described the campaign as squalid. And he was absolutely right. And like many have already remarked, my heart sank when I saw that poster of a smirking Nigel Farage before his poster of a stream of people escaping a war and conflict which had absolutely nothing to do with the European Union. It wasn't long afterwards that that poster was taken up on social media by pointing out its similarity to a picture promoted in the 1930s by Dr. Joseph Goebbels. And the only substantial difference I could see between the two posters was that Dr. Goebbels was in black and white. We've seen the result of the conduct of that campaign. People have referred to it often enough this evening. And is that what we've come to a mere 71 years after the end of the Second World War? Is that all Farage and his cronies can offer us? Of course, they've now resigned and left others to clear up this mess they've left behind and clear up with the implications of what is happening from what they've done. But worse than that, my own feeling is that is Britain now advertising that one of a British value is xenophobia? Is that what is appearing to the world from here? And that is what we have to fight. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Like many people in this country, I've spent hours researching my family history. And I've usually found that people are really intrigued when they find out that they've got ancestors who come from another country. For example, many of us have probably seen the episode of Who Do You Think You Are, when Boris Johnson was finding out about his Turkish ancestors. I'm sure they'd be thrilled at what he's done recently. And some of these ancestors that we've researched have come to this country because they were fleeing persecution and found Britain to be a safe haven. Others might have relocated because they had an urge to travel, or even, yes, for financial reasons. But we have to remember that Britain has benefited greatly over the years from this migration. Personally, I have a son who has lived and worked in Spain and who is now living happily in Ireland. But like many EU migrants, he didn't move for financial reasons. It's the fact that people are naturally curious about other countries and like to travel and see something of life in other parts of the world. But along the way, they contribute both financially and intellectually to the country they have moved to. Until recently, we welcomed people from all other EU countries, and in fact, we invited them to come here to fulfill certain roles, such as in the NHS, in our universities, and in many of our companies that needed their skills. But now we have some people living in our country who say they no longer feel as welcome as they did. And I have a quote from someone who said that now they feel, "You don't know what people are thinking about you." and this is unsettling. So unless we take action, we could face losing the skills and expertise of many of these people. I know that some people are now turning down jobs in this country, and others are turning down the opportunity to study in our universities because they feel threatened by some of the comments being bandied about. And we do need the skills and expertise of people such as university lecturers and researchers, but some of them now don't know what sort of reception to expect in a country where politicians stand up and say, "We want our country back," as if it has been stolen or invaded. The implications of these concerns is that this country could lose people who contribute vast amounts to our society. In the areas of research and development, it is essential that we work with other EU countries, and it's also essential that we continue to coordinate our academic qualifications with the rest of Europe to allow our academic institutions to compete in a global market. The Bologna Agreement, which is a single market for education, was brought about so that educational qualifications throughout the EU could be recognised in each member country. Without this agreement continuing, we will fail to attract students and academics to this country, and we'll lose out globally, not just in Europe. And although I was horrified by the tone and content of many speeches made during the referendum campaign, I've since been heartened by comments made by some people who recognise that we do live in a small island that is part of a small, fragile planet, and that, in fact, we all need to work together with tolerance and respect. And we all need to remind people that migrant workers can bring skills and expertise that we need in our city and also in our country. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rahman. Councillor Rahman.
Lord Mayor, repairing community relationship, indeed we should, we must, and you this morning might have planted a small seed by attending the Eid prayer, and I received a phone call before I came to council meeting tonight. Just over 3,500 people were attending at Westgate Centre for Sport, so it's, I suppose, in our way, taking steps, small steps as such, is making those fragile. I won't say it's broken. I'll say it is fragile, and this is coming from a victim. You've heard, colleagues, everyone, you've heard from lots of colleagues about the stats post EU referendum, the impact it's having. Today, I celebrated Eid al-Fitr. It's the day immediately after the 30 days of fasting that all Muslims have been fasting. And ideally, I would have been at home celebrating with my family, but I couldn't not attend this very special meeting today, especially when I found out about this particular motion that's coming on, and I thank Councillor Faulkner for bringing this, then subsequently the amended motion that's coming in. As a victim, and I say as a victim, I do believe Newcastle is a safe city. It is fragile now, and I am very scared. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to come to the council meeting today, not spending time with my family, is because I wanted to pay respect to somebody that I don't know, but all of a sudden I feel as though I know them deeply personally, and that is somebody who is like us, Joe Cox, who has been butchered to death. I've got colleagues, I'm going to find this quite difficult, so bear with us. I don't know Joe's children, but I feel their pains, and I feel I'm more connected with them. I know they're very young. I migrated here
with my mum back in 1986 with my all my brothers. I love my mum dearly. She is my role model, and she is the face that I see and I need to see when I'm suffering. And for the past 30 years, I have been suffering. I was in the brink of mental breakdown, and one of my colleagues is here when I worked for North Tyneside Council, going back in 2003, 2004. It was a period when it was very difficult for me. And I'd like to share this with everyone. Wallsend was where I was based, working, because every one of us goes through a period where they have suffered in more than many different ways. Joe's children are very tender. I cannot recall ever seeing my dad. The only thing that I found out was on the 19th of May 1977, having just arrived in Newcastle, moving from London, in Wallsend, working in his restaurant that he established with his brother. 10 days of his life into Newcastle, he was butchered to death, stabbed to death at that restaurant, trying to earn a living to feed his children. Now that's victims. That's how much one is suffering. I've been suffering all those pain and emotion, and naturally, I want to share this to everyone. Every one of us, I believe, it's a personal opinion, you might all differ, every one of us have devils in us, and I felt I needed to challenge myself. And that's the reason why when I sought the opportunity, I wanted to go to the place and I wanted to challenge myself, and ultimately I conclude, having lived here for 30 years of my life, Newcastle is a safe place. Not every terrorist, not every racist, not every rapist represent a colour, a religion, a culture, or carry a number of issues. They are just perpetrators of horrendous crimes, and I feel scared, because when your children start asking you questions and you just don't have answers. My son, youngest one, Tamim, second son, some of you might have come across him, he asks a lot of questions. I'm damn proud of him. And it was the birth of Tamim that really kept me going. And my mom, when I posed her the question, and one of the reasons why I had to leave Wallsend was discovering the very people that I'm helping with, I'm working with, I came across the murderers of my father. And how was I to... I haven't got words to express the emotion, the feelings that I was going through, and those were painful periods. But then I looked at my son, my second son who arrived in this world. He was my inspiration, and my mom, when I went and shared the information to my mom, I had to disclose to someone, and she said she had already forgotten and forgiven the persons or individuals who have taken away the love of her life. She was barely on her late 30s, having to raise all those children all by herself. Now, I know as a victim, I'm still suffering, because when I see my friend, my colleagues, not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, a female friend of mine who was assaulted verbally. This is not the last thing anybody wanted. These are issues, serious issues that's going on everywhere. Now, I am not going to blame any particular communities. Racism exists in every wards. It's what we do, it's how we do, what we can do. And as a victim, Council, Lord Mayor, what I'm saying to you is Newcastle is a safe city. It can be made a safer and better city, but we all have a duty. And I feel it's a statutory duty that each and every one of us have to ensure victims, people aren't suffering and there aren't any victims. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hammond. I think Council will agree that was, excuse me, a very powerful and very emotional and very moving testimony. I do beg your pardon. We now move on to, thank you, Councillor Faulkner, right to reply. Thank you, Councillor Faulkner.
I'm pleased that so many members wanted to participate in this debate and to share certainly personal stories, and in Habib's case a very painful personal story, and impressions of an experience from your roles as councillors in your communities. And I'm grateful that the council is united on this. I just want to say one thing, if I may, however. I don't think there's any particular point to respond to as such in the debate. We are a city for sanctuary, and I think we can be very proud of that. But it kind of occurred to me as Councillor McCarthy was speaking that some years ago she and I were both active in the Racial Equality Council. The Racial Equality Council imploded and was never replaced. We used to have a migration partnership based in Newcastle. That was disbanded and went to Middlesbrough. We had a City for Peace initiative, and that ceased in 2011. We have had an organisation called People for People, People to People, which Lord Mayors have been patron of for 20 or 30 years, and it folded last month. We had a Holocaust working group, which ceased to function. We don't have a BME forum in this city when they have one in Middlesbrough and in Sunderland. And we now don't have local SNAPS meetings to share experience and knowledge and talk to the police and communities or other agencies, and we don't have ward committees. Now, I'm not saying that any of these need to be recreated. I think what I am saying, though, is that there needs to be some way, we have to come out of this with some kind of network of people, or not maybe an organisation in any formal sense, but just passing a motion and just having a nice meeting with lots of people who say we all agree we're going to do something. I think we need to challenge ourselves a bit more formally than that. And the responsibility of taking forward this motion will rest with the administration, but we are certainly willing to help, and I hope that one of the things might be just to think whether there isn't room or scope for some kind of agency or organisation that does bring us all together so we can be stronger together. Of course, we've got to act out this role ourselves, and we will do, but I think we're stronger together as we know. And I just want to just one final thing. When I was thinking of City for Peace, the Bishop had lecture to 500 people in the banqueting hall as a City for Peace lecture. And it was a very interesting concept because he was asked to talk about tolerance, and he actually said, actually, think of the word tolerance. Don't we do more than just tolerate? Tolerating something isn't enough. And I started thinking about that in relation to the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's visit to Newcastle. And it is a kind of rights issue, really, isn't it? It's more than just being tolerant. It's about upholding people's rights to be respected as individuals. So I hope that maybe we can find the right context, the right language, the right agency, the right organisation to take forward this. And I remember 2 years ago, we awarded some fantastic individuals and organisations, Mandela Awards we called them, for exactly that. People who are working in communities in our city, bringing people together. And maybe they're people that we could go back to and say, could you help shape some kind of initiative that will have legs? It won't just be the council meeting and a couple of meetings after that and a march against EDL if they come to the city or whatever. All of that's necessary, but something actually which will have some enduring impact and make a real difference and show that we are stronger together and we do want to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Faulkner. Council, is the motion incorporating the amendment therefore agreed? Thank you. Councillor Denham.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In light of the unexpected delays to business this evening and that we have members of the public who attended expressly for agenda item 14, I'd like to propose the suspension of Standing Order 19B in order that that business can be heard.
Do we agree that? Thank you. Thank you. We now move on then to item 14, notice of motion, Women Against State Pension Inequality. I will call on Councillor McCarthy to move the motion, seconded by Councillor Robinson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'm sorry, I was just trying to get my campaign sorted. I'm really pleased, and thank you very much, colleagues, for allowing us to speak on this issue, because there are people who are involved in the WASPI campaign in the city and in the region here tonight who want to hear what we've got to say about this. Lord Mayor, we all believe one of our key priorities in here is about tackling inequalities. Indeed, the debate we have just had addresses many of those issues, and age inequality or equalisation of pension age also needs to be resolved. I don't think any of us would disagree with that. The age of retirement, as many of us know, for many, many years was different for men and for women. In trying to resolve that, I think what the government have created are more problems for us. So those women who were born in the 50s have been hardest hit. And it's not necessarily because they disagree with the overall direction of travel. It's actually more about the way that the government have implemented those changes. And primarily because most women in their 50s would have expected to retire at the age of 60. If that changes by a year or even 2 years, you might be able to be prepared for that. But the problem around this issue is that those changes were put in place without telling the women who were affected what the detail of those changes were. And that means that people in that position were not able to save up the resources to help them through that period of time. For some people, you know, the age of retirement is a big change in their life, and you might be able to access work pension but not your state pension, but that might mean that you actually can't exist in the way that you want to live your life. And I think the biggest problem that we have is that the way that this has been implemented is fundamentally unfair. I will say that the proposals that have been put forward, because they've been changed in recent years, have generated this campaign, this WASPI campaign, which I'm really delighted, to be honest, that we're supporting this in a cross-party way. Because I think it's unfair that the women who are affected were unable to be properly prepared for their retirement. And because the changes were made so late in their lives, those even who were aware of what the changes were couldn't put aside the savings to boost their pension to help them to be better prepared. Lord Mayor, there was a massive petition, we say so in the motion, over 200,000 signatures on that, which means that you get a debate in Westminster. And I think in the city we should be proud of Catherine McKinnell's contribution to that, because she has been in the forefront really on behalf of the region for that campaign. The people involved in WASPI have had a massive demonstration in London, and for those of us who are off to the Miners' Gala on Saturday, they'll also be there. Lord Mayor, I think all we're asking for is for the government to properly listen to the people who are affected, to listen to those stories, because actually, Lord Mayor, it's about the individual, the impact, it's the anecdotes, it's the individual stories that the government needs to hear, and they need to review the implementation of their proposals and respond appropriately to those affected. So I'm delighted to bring this forward, Lord Mayor, to Council tonight. I hope we go home with a spirit of conviction and togetherness in relation to this issue, so that we make sure that the government hears what we are saying. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Seconded by Councillor Robinson.
Lord Mayor, I'd like to second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Greenough.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. A few people might be a bit surprised why a 27-year-old male is getting up to this motion. As Councillor McCarthy mentioned, I work for Catherine McKinnell. She's the Vice Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on this issue, so I've had the pleasure of speaking to a number of the women who have been affected in Newcastle, and the sort of sense of injustice that they feel on this has really brought me to speak on this motion. Now, I'd like to start by crediting the WASPI campaign. They've been excellent in highlighting this issue, and especially online. The Twitter is really, they call it a swarm on Twitter with the amount of WASPI women who tweet on this issue. There's over 10,000 women in Newcastle alone who have been impacted, and that's only by the 2011 changes, where they accelerated the changes under the coalition government. And I know from the makeup of my own ward in Denton that many of those affected will be in Denton and across the Outer West. The WASPI campaign has done great work in challenging the unfairness, and there was a lobby in Parliament, and I know that a number of people from Newcastle went down to it. I think one of them is actually, is at the back tonight. And members will be aware that they've also set up a group recently, the Newcastle, Weir and Tees WASPI group, and I hope that Council will do everything we can to support that group in highlighting this issue. And I'm sure that they're pleased that we've brought forward this motion tonight. Despite all this pressure, the government are refusing to budge at the moment and refusing to move on the changes that were brought forward in 2011, where they accelerated change. And that's the main thing. There's a lot of women who have been impacted twice, once by the 1995 changes, but then again by the 2011 changes. And they've been hit twice by the movement of the goalposts, and it's simply not fair. I'm pleased to hear there is going to be a cross-party supported, and that the Liberal Democrats have maybe come round to realising the mistakes that they made in government. Indeed, their former Lib Dem pension minister, Steve Webb, has admitted that the decision was a bad decision in accelerating the changes in the way that they did. He did say that they tried to stop it towards the end, but they'd gone too far at that stage. Well, what can I say on that? I hope that all members can send a strong message tonight to the 10,000 women affected in Newcastle, that we recognise the unfairness of the changes, that we stand with those who will be affected, and that we join them in urging the government to change tack and support the women affected. I fully support the motion and would like to congratulate my colleague in bringing it forward. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Greenough. And I would like Council to congratulate Councillor Greenough on his maiden speech. Councillor Ashby.
Lord Mayor, a government review of the changes to state pension arrangements, including the impact of the age changes, is set to be published in May 2017. So now is an appropriate time to make representation to government, even though its reaction to the 193,000 petition signatories was to say in February that it had no plans to alter state pension ages. It's worth recalling that the biggest part of the changes to increase the pension age for women to 65 were set out in 1995, but the Labour government of 1997 to 2010 did nothing about the issue of perceived unfairness. I suppose we can't entirely blame ministers. As has been said, the former Liberal Democrat Minister Steve Webb has said the decision in 2011 to accelerate the process and stage the increase for both men and women to 66 by 2020 was wrong, and that very poor briefing by civil servants about the full implications of it was to blame, and the measures were rushed through. On learning a few months later how the policy would affect people, and that some women would after all have to wait more than one extra year for their pensions, he lobbied the Prime Minister and the Chancellor for some relief. As a result, £1 billion was set aside for mitigation. And we should also note that the former Tory Minister campaigning on the issue has had no effect whatsoever on his colleagues. I hope that more of those affected in Newcastle tell Councillor McCarthy of their circumstances so the Council can make a robust argument to government, and I support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, reserved right to speak. No other speakers.
Thank you, Lord Mayor again. I support this motion I believe it is unfair, unrealistic and unequal for women who were born in the 50s to have to suffer. Some of these women started work at the age of 15. They worked hard, paid their national insurance in the belief that they would retire at 60 years of age. That is possibly 40 years old, and if not more. The employment contributions have been put into the government coffers. We would like to know what they've been doing with it. A lot of women have lost a lot of money with the changes in the pension law. All these women were not notified on how these changes would affect them. So when they reach 60, they keep going, it goes up every year. So effectively, there is a chance that they may not even get everything that they are entitled to. There are quite a few women in Wilsonton Ward who have reached this milestone, and I would say in all of the 26 wards in Newcastle. They are hard-working, doing heavy manual jobs such as cleaning, kitchen assistants, care workers in the public sector and private sector. These people have worked part-time for many years and weren't even allowed to join a pension scheme to save for their later years, so were dependent on a state pension to retire at 60. The physical and financial strain is enormous on women who have severe health issues, who have no option but to carry on working. They do not have any other income to help. This is unjust, so I hope that this motion will be supported by all in this chambers. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McCarthy, right to reply.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you to colleagues for their contributions. I think we particularly thank the women from the WASPI campaign who've sat through the whole of tonight's City Council meeting. Until we get to this point, I think we need to place special thanks to them for staying through. Lord Mayor, I think we wish them well in their campaign, and if there is anything that we in the Council Chamber can contribute to their campaign, I'm sure we will try to do that. It just struck me, Lord Mayor, listening to that, that I kind of take for granted that people have pensions as well as access to state pension, but actually women in the 50s didn't work necessarily all through their working lives, and actually for those women it's probably much more a significant issue. I think Councillor Ashby asked us to make a robust argument to government. I think he can be assured that we will do that. We ought to be demanding changes in these proposals to ensure that they are fair and they address the injustice that we're also clearly opposed to. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I hope we agree this wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Council, is the motion agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you, ladies at the back. Yes, because Councillor McCarthy pinched the words exactly out my mouth. Might I take this moment to thank Council for their forbearance with the time that was spent on the earlier item on the agenda. I trust and hope that that will not be a regular thing in the Council chamber in the future. However, before I close the meeting, I would very much like to remind members that the next meeting of Council will be on Wednesday the 7th of September, and I wish you all a happy summer. I think it may be a busy one though, but there we go. Thank you.